Is Virginia Tech getting antsy for an answer? And the latest on the Penn State coaching search. Let's get after it right here. Hit the subscribe button. Please like and share. It's free. Make sure that when you're listening that you hit that subscribe button. Help us grow. We really appreciate it. Well, we have gone through a number of the coaching searches, and we want to give an update what's going on at Virginia Tech and Penn State. There's a little bit of a lap over there. Penn State is looking at a lot of options. They certainly like Clark Lee, and Brent Key is somebody that they've looked at. Kind of down the line, Bob Chesney of James Madison is a bright young guy that might be the next, special young coach. Also looking, Brian Hartline, Will Stein, Pat Fitzgerald has come up by some in that administration. So there's, I think, a number of guys that they're looking at, vetting. I do think Brian Daboll, who's, I think, an outstanding coach, and I think the problems with the Giants were really not due to his coaching. I think he'll be a really good college coach if he wants to do it. I think he has some interest in it. Al Golden is a former, Penn State player and defense coordinator of the Bengals. So they're looking at a lot of different situations. Virginia Tech, why do I bring them up? They would like to get a deal done with James Franklin. They feel he could bring some energy to the program, and I think it's probably a really good fit. His agent, Jimmy Sexton, and James are slow playing Virginia Tech. They're wanting to see if something else better comes open. His chances at Auburn, Florida, and LSU are not very good, I don't think. But I think he has an interest at maybe waiting a little longer to see if one of them might show a little more interest than they have to this point. He also has an interest in Florida State if that comes open. So I think that he's kind of slow playing him. I think Virginia Tech's getting a little antsy. I think they'd like to move on to Bob Chesney if he's not. And look, I think for the programs like a Virginia Tech, they're not competing with the other programs necessarily for the same guys. Because if somebody has a chance to go to Penn State or Florida or Auburn or LSU, they're going to go there over Virginia Tech. But I don't know that the options for James Franklin are as good as he and Jimmy might think, but we shall see how that plays out. For Penn State, certainly trying to find that right guy is extremely important. Taking their time. I think that the right fit is always important for any of these hires. Getting somebody that's not just a good recruiter, but a good developer of talent is something that is really important. I do think that a number of the guys that they've looked at make a lot of sense that fits that category. Do they want to make a splash? I mean, for example, I think that there are a couple of guys that can do a really good job. Brent Key is probably not as experienced enough as a head coach to maybe make a move, just as I brought him up with Auburn, but I do think he's going to be very good. Bob Chesney is got a lot of upside. In terms of a guy that's a really good coach that's ready to make that move, and we saw obviously what Kurt Cignetti's done. There's a lot of people, including me, that thinks that in the right place he could do that. That's reason alone to think that Bob Chesney should be really high on their list. I don't know that Clark Lee has much interest in Penn State, leaving Vanderbilt and going to Penn State. So I think they are in the process of still trying to work through who could they get and who's still out there. I know everybody thinks that their school can get anybody that they want. It's just simply not true. I don't care who it is. They're, again, looking at some really good assistants, the Brian Hartlines, the Will Steins. Again, I think they'd rather go with somebody with more coaching and head coaching experience. I do think Pat Fitzgerald makes a lot of sense. He certainly was exonerated from that issues at Northwestern, and he is the type of guy that would be a really good fit, that fits kind of the toughness, recruited in that conference, and and I think it would be a good personality fit. But I do think that there's some interest in maybe looking at a couple of other guys that have come open and that will come open. So I think while Penn State's going to be a little more patient and kind of see what else might be out there, I think that you'll see some of these other openings get to the point where they're going to be ready to make a move. I do think that places like Arkansas, they are places like Virginia Tech. I think Virginia Tech knows who they want to hire, and it's just a matter of getting them to agree to it. I think other places that are what I would call group of four, but maybe not the upper tier of the group of four, they're not in the hunt for the same coaches as the upper tier guys. But one of the things that I think is interesting is the guy that maybe is on the short list, but not the top of the short list for those big schools. They would like to get a deal with one of those guys pretty soon. Problem is, they're kind of waiting to see as candidates whether they can get something a little bit better. So it's a little bit of a challenge. Now, I always say in some regards you can make the case, well, let's go get a deal done. But if you are patient and that guy doesn't get the top job, then all of a sudden you become maybe the best job available at that point once these top guys come off the board. So I do think that you're going to see some movement here in the next week or two. We could see a decision, for example, by Lane Kiffin after the Florida game. Not immediately, but it's the bye week. Will he spend some time to look at the deal at Ole Miss, make a decision at that point? I think if he's going to stay at Ole Miss, I think making that decision next week makes a whole lot of sense. If he doesn't, then I would think that there is serious consideration on his part to maybe look at moving on. So we'll keep an eye out on that. There'll be a domino effect because while some of them are not at the same guys, some of them at least have the same guys on their long list. So we'll kind of see how it goes. I don't personally see Eli Drinkwitz as good a fit at Penn State. He's somebody that they vetted, and I do think can be a good coach at a bigger job. But I think the fit and kind of where he might be best fit, I quite frankly, I think he'd be a better fit out of Florida. Not because it's a better job, it's just a different job in a different position. I think Penn State looking for somebody that's a little more grounded, recruiting, toughness, line of scrimmage, and I think some of the guys that they're looking hard at have a strong belief in that area. So we'll see how that goes and see if somebody like Eli may get into that mix. I know he's been mentioned a lot out there, but he's certainly interested, I think, for the right job leaving Missouri. A lot to get to, a lot of movement. I know it's frustrating. People want to know. Look, I think until the dominoes fall, we're not there yet. But keep it here. Hit the subscribe button, share, like, and we'll keep you up to date on all the latest.